Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
Some of my family members are Christian and some are Muslim. And my parents, they came up to New York, to the north, as many African Americans did in the Great Migration, they call it, the 30s and 40s, to find jobs in the north. And they were very suspicious of white people, considering the history of African American and transatlantic slavery and so forth. So they were very skeptical about me joining the temple. But I used to go to the Sunday feast and I'd come back with prasadam and I'd come back with halava and pakoras, and my dad loved them. And when I said, Dad, I'd like to join these people, they said that I could join. He says, well, no, I don't know about those people. And then I said, but Papa, they believe God is black. And my father, I remember his eyes. He said, what? He said, now that's what I'm talking about. Those people, yeah. Then, shortly thereafter, my uncle called him up because my Aunt Louise was downtown and she saw me on the Harinam party. And I remember she just stood there and looked at me like this. She was shocked. She couldn't even say anything. I just kept chanting. She went home and told my Uncle Eddie. My Uncle Eddie called my father and he said, Roy, Louise was downtown and she saw your boy on the corner with those Hare Krishna people, bothering people, handing out candies and magazines and asking them for money. What's going on with that? And him and my father, they had a bit of discussion, and he said, look, the boy told me that they worship God and they believe that God's black. My Uncle Eddie said, what? Those people believe that God's a brother? He said, all right, we're going down there. We're going to see this for ourselves. So Sunday feast come. Dozens of people from my family members came. My grandmother came, my cousins, my brothers, my sisters, my aunts, they all came to the temple. Beautiful Sunday feast, the devotees sat them down, they gave them nice prasadam. They got to see the deities, and they saw for themselves that indeed these white people are worshiping this God who's black. And not only that, not only is he a brother, but he's musical. He plays the flute too. So we know he's God. Yeah. So when I decided that yes, I would like to join, my father said, yep, they worship God, God's a brother, yeah, you can join. It's a true story. Yep, you can join because he's black, and we know black is beautiful, so it's good.
What I expected, in the sense that here's a sadhu, here's someone who's actually talking the talk, walking the walk, talking the talk. New Yorkers, we have a kind of a jaded outlook, what sort of, I think we were the show me state before Missouri was the show me state, you had to prove it. We'd seen so many cheaters, Satchidananda, Guru Maharaji, this person, that person, the Maharishi. So when I saw Prabhupada, I had a sense that this person is speaking from a platform that none of these other people could speak from. And I felt that it was more than just words going through my brain. I actually felt a change of heart at the time he was speaking. So much so that I was convinced at that point, because I appreciated the philosophy, and I stayed in the temple up to that point, in anticipation that Prabhupada was coming, and I get to see the person who I completely had so much respect for with regards to how he was describing, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. But when he spoke, I actually saw through his words how Maya and Krishna were present in the assembly of devotees, in the sense that Maya was not so much a concept that I could really grasp, how she's Krishna's energy, how she's controlling the living entities through the modes of material nature. And it was still, but when Prabhupada spoke, I actually saw in my mind Krishna and Maya side by side. I thought this was something that I didn't expect. And it gave me the conviction that this was a unique experience that I could reference, that I never had. It was certainly a revelation, an epiphany, whatever you want to call it at the time. But everything seemed to come, and I said, I'm forced now to make this choice to fully surrender, which I thought, since my youth, that if I ever found the absolute truth, I would definitely make it my focus, my goal of life, to pursue it. And so now here it was, and Maya was trying to, but I saw that Maya was powerless in Prabhupada's presence. And so then I said, yes, this is the person that I can trust. Trust was a big thing back in the day, We didn't trust anybody over 30. Prabhupada was definitely over 30. I said, this person I can trust with my entire life, that I have, any fears I had, any misgivings I had at that moment were completely gone. And then I thought to myself, if in the future I ever have a doubt, I just have to remember this moment. A moment of full conviction. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Sastrakoy. Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhihoy. I didn't know that verse, but I felt it at that time. Sadhu Sangha, association devotees. Repeated twice, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Sastrakoy. That this, everything is there in this association. So much so that Lava Matra, one moment's association of Sadhu Sangha, of the association of these saintly persons, Sarva Siddhihoy, gives all perfection and benediction. All perfection, but Lava Matra in Sanskrit means one moment, means 1/11th of a second. It's the smallest fraction of time, 1/11th of a second. So having met Srila Prabhupada for that time, that was the first time I'm hearing him speak. He came into the temple, he looked around, he went to his room, and then it came to that was an evening lecture. He used to give morning and evening. And I thought very clearly that at that time, so 1974, I was 23. Well, 75 first time, but still. I have to surrender. I don't have a choice.
I was going to the temple every morning, and I was looking forward to it. So when Srila Prabhupada came, he stayed at Stinson Beach. And so Mukunda, before he even came to visit the temple, and Mukunda and I hitchhiked out there. And so we come in the back of his house, of the house he was staying on the beach, and he was there. I saw Kirtanananda, and he was like in a bed sheet or something. He was kind of trying to look like a Hindu, and he looked like he was wearing a bed sheet, a white bed sheet, and he had a shaved head. And Prabhupada walked out in the garden, and Mukunda didn't bow or I mean, it was just like Mukunda said, "Swamiji, this is Richard. I told you about him. And I just put my hand out, and Prabhupada shook my hand. And then he says, "Come inside." And we went inside the room, and he sat down on a bed with his back to the ocean. There was a window behind him; you could see the beach, and he was sitting on the bed. And I had these red beads that Malati had stolen and strung for me, and so I gave him my beads, and he chanted on the beads, and then he told me my name was Hrisikesha, and told me the meaning of it. And then I asked Srila Prabhupada, you know, what should I do? I'm in this situation where I've run away from the army, I can't kill people, and I forgot to mention, when I first joined the temple, I was already a vegetarian, so that was really easy for me to, I really liked that because I already was a vegetarian. They were telling me, you can't eat meat. I said, great. You know? And so Prabhupada said, yeah, Mukunda has told me about your situation. You should come and you should stay with me in Vrindavan. Stay with me in Vrindavan. I said, well, Swamiji, I don't have a passport. I can't even get a passport. I don't have any money. You know, I'm just a fugitive. I can't, you know, people are probably looking for me, you know. And so Prabhupada said, no, you just chant Hare Krishna, and the name of Krishna will save you from any situation, So, you know, the next morning, Prabhupada came to the temple on Frederick Street, and I was there, and everybody was packed with devotees. And I still remember, you know, Upendra. By the way, when I was initiated, Kirtananda was there and Upendra was there. So those are the two devotees who were present when I got initiated. So the next morning, Prabhupada came to the temple, and I was there, and Prabhupada was giving a talk, and he was saying, it was very emotional because he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to come back because he had had a stroke, and he was going back to try and get his health back, and so he was telling us that, you know, he's not sure if he's going to come back, and he was just concerned that we shouldn't forget what he's given us. And in the process of telling that, he choked up, and everybody started crying. It was just, including me, everybody just, it was because he couldn't even get, we knew what he was saying, but he just choked up, you know, and I had never seen anything so sincere.
I remember when we went to Paris in 1973, that was for the installation, and I had a certain idea of a garland that I wanted to make for Prabhupada. And I looked everywhere, and with another god sister, we went all over Paris to find flowers. Finally, I found some, we bought some, I made this garland, and it was very hot time of the year, in the summertime. And that was for Prabhupada's afternoon garland, and he would get sandalwood paste. So I had to keep this, he didn't have refrigeration, so we had to keep the garland cool. So I remember sprinkling water on it. So when it came time for Prabhupada to have his garland, one of the brahmacharis grabbed it from him, trying to dry it off, and he said, please, you have to dry the garland. He just said, I've got to go now. Prabhupada has to have his garland. So when this brahmachari came back, I said, well, did you give him the garland? What did Prabhupada say? And he said, he put it on him, Prabhupada took it off and said, here, you wear it. Because it was still wet, and I was crestfallen.
When Srila Prabhupada first started to speak to us, all the book distributors in San Francisco in 1972, we were doing big relatively, we were competing with LA, and we expected some kind of pep talk or some kind of, you know? So the first words out of his mouth was, are you reading my books? And Vaisheshika Prabhu and I looked at each other with a smile because we were, a lot. And then Prabhupada explained how much he wanted us to read the books, how important it was for us to read the books. And while he was, and then BharatiDas started introducing us individually. And when he came to me, he said I was doing this, I was doing that. I became embarrassed. I felt uncomfortable. I said, Srila Prabhupada, I cut him off. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, whatever he's saying about me is all your mercy. And Srila Prabhupada said in a kind of strong voice, it is not. And I felt like I wanted to dig a hole and get into it. And then he said, and he changed, the atmosphere changed. He said, it is the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. And waves of humility were flowing from him. In the same way that I felt when I first started to read the books, and I didn't know even that he was my spiritual master, that same humility became real it became concrete, you know. Prabhupada wasn't just, I mean, he wasn't just putting it on. Of course, Prabhupada, I don't mean to say, make an offense, but he was just genuinely, completely, 100% humble.
It was in the Brooklyn Henry Street Temple, 1975. Srila Prabhupada came to town, and a whole bunch of devotees, we went to the airport, and we were told that Srila Prabhupada would be coming down this escalator. So we're all standing in JFK Airport, chanting. You can't do that anymore these days. And we were told he's coming down the escalator, but then he wasn't. We were told he's coming from this direction, and then everyone turned around, ran towards Srila Prabhupada. And I saw Prabhupada walking, and I thought, oh, yes, yes, and I was just filled with the excitement of, you know, finally meeting the spiritual master. But I had an interesting exchange with him. He was sitting on the Vyasasana in the temple, giving a lecture. And I was right next to the Vyasasana, and one of the devotees, Vidyabhushan Prabhu, I believe his name was, he was fanning Srila Prabhupada, but he was also recording on one of those old reel-to-reels. He was an audio man. And he had to swap the tape over, and he said, here, take the fan and fan Srila Prabhupada. And I said, well, how do I do? What do I do? He said, were you watching me? I said, yes. He said, well, then you do what I was doing. So I took the fan, and I started doing this. And Srila Prabhupada was giving the lecture, and he turned and he looked at me like this. And this is what I did. And then he turned back and continued with the lecture. I took that look to me, slow down, young man, slow down. Yeah. And I had another exchange. A year and a bit later, at the Detroit temple, my fire sacrifice. Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasana, and the devotees were doing the yajna. And when it came time to go up, during the Guru Puja, to offer our flowers to Srila Prabhupada, I walked up to him, and I handed him a flower, and he just looked at me and gave me the biggest smile. But I interpreted that smile as meaning, oh yes, this is the same boy who was fanning me crazily some time ago. He's still here chanting and doing service. Very nice, very nice. That was my interpretation of his smile. Yeah, yeah.
I was standing next to him in one class. And of course standing because, you know, we were up all night, you know, doing whatever we were doing and couldn't sit down. And we'd see that, you know, so if you sat down, you fell asleep, Prabhupada would definitely chastise you. So I was standing up on his left side. And and it's in the lecture, he was talking, he was lecturing on second canto. And he said, if you want to pick up something good, you have to first put down the dirty thing that you're holding. And he made this motion like this to release whatever that dirty thing was. And when he said that, he looked right at me, just stared, because, you know, obviously he knew I wasn't maybe 100%, you know, although I'd committed and I'm thinking I'm surrendered, but, you know, the dirty thing's in the heart. So I took it to heart. I made sure I dropped all those dirty things as quickly as possible. It was a very good instruction. I never forget it.
Then from London, I went to India. So I go over to India. I have on a one-way ticket and a false passport, and I get to Brindaban, and I go to Radha Damodar temple, and it's just getting dark. And I knock on the door, and some old Mataji comes to the door, and what? Nobody spoke English, and then some Goswami came, and I said, "Is Swamiji here? You know, I'm here to stay with Swamiji." And he started, you know, Swamiji chala gaya, Swamiji chala gaya, Swamiji neha. You know, he started speaking in Hindi, and I was like, at that time I didn't understand anything. So he finally told me, Swamiji chala gaya, Hawaj mein, America wapas gaya. Telling me Swamiji had gone back to America and he wasn't here anymore. So I said, wow, you know, can I stay here? can I stay here? They said, no, you can't stay here. You know, so I said, oh, I wonder where I should go. It's getting dark, and I don't have anywhere to go. And they said, well, they said, Ban Maharaj, because they knew Ban Maharaj spoke English. You know, so they wrote something down in Hindi, and I just started wandering around Vrindavan, showing people this Hindi, and I ended up at the gate at Ban Maharaj's place. And there was kirtan going on, and I was standing at the gate, and so finally somebody saw me outside the gate, and they came out. One sannyasi came out named Madan Maharaj, and I told him, I said, I've come to see Swamiji, and he's going back to America. You know, is Swami Ban here? He said, Swami Ban's in Bombay. He'll be back in a month. So I said, well, can I stay here? And no. This is an ashram where we, you know, I was in Mlecha, you know, and there was, at that time, there was nobody in Vrindavan, no foreigners. And so I finally convinced them, let me stay here. Let me stay here to meet Swami Ban, you know. So they said, okay, you can stay here. So for a month, I was there, you know, trying my best. I was Sahib. They kept calling me Sahib, you know. But the way they would say it was Sahib, everything was Sahib. If I stepped on their shadow, they would take a bath. Everything I did was wrong. And so I was trying really hard to, you know, figure out, and I was going with the program. They, you know, 4:30 you wake up, you know, they had the kirtan, arati, then you did bhajan and all this. I still had my red beads. I got my red beads back when I left the jail. And so finally Swami Ban came back, and I told him my story. And he said, well, you can stay here. You can stay here and practice Krishna consciousness here. And he knew I was a disciple of Swamiji, at that time Swamiji. You know, at that time Prabhupada there was only one Prabhupada. And, there was nobody else called Prabhupada except Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati at that time. And so I actually ended up staying there 6 years. And learned Bengali, fluent Bengali, learned fluent Hindi, learned Sanskrit. You know, learned how to read and write Sanskrit and everything, and Swami Ban was there all the time, so it was kind of like having Prabhupada. It was kind of like 6 years if you lived with Prabhupada every single day for 6 years, and you just got to ask him any question you wanted. When I got back to Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada was there, and you know, I went in and I told him that I was sorry that I hadn't come back sooner, and I didn't get his letters, and told him the whole thing. He asked me, so how is Ban Maharaj? And I said, he's just busy with his school. And he said, yes, he's the rectum of the Institute of Oriental Philosophy. That's what he told me. I was a bit shocked at that, because I wasn't used to devotees, you know, speaking like that about other devotees. And so, but Prabhupada laughed, you know, and I could see right away that he was just, he had a sense of humor, and he was just making a joke, you know. And so I laughed too, and then Prabhupada said, okay, you stay in the room next to me with Shruti Kirti, and I need you to help me translate the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and come to see me, come every day, and we're going to talk. And so we started speaking in Bengali, and he really got a kick out of that. I could see he really liked it. And so he was always, he was questioning me, you know, to see what I had learned, you know. So what you have learned? I said about Nitya Leela, you know, and he said, you know, tell me what you learned about it. And I told him how it's different than Boma Leela and this and that, and was reciting slokas. I mean, Prabhupada could see that I really had this down. And Prabhupada said he wanted me to help him translate the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so he put me together with Pradyamna. So I had Upadeshamrita with me, you know, that I carried with me in Hindi and in Bengali and Sanskrit. So I told Srila Prabhupada, I said, Prabhupada, no, I said Gurudev, that's what I called him back then. I said, Gurudev, how about Upadeshamrita? You know, this Chaitanya Charitamrita is a huge thing, and we could do this 11 slokas and really fast, because this whole book is only 11 slokas. So Prabhupada said, you know, Prabhupada asked me, so you have the book? And I said, yes, I have it. He says, bring it here. And so he said, okay, go get a paper, get a pencil. And so he just started translating it, you know, right on the spot in English. And I was writing it down, and I couldn't keep up with him. So then he started using his dictaphone and giving it to somebody else to dictate. So during this whole thing, we were having all these discussions about Boma Lila, Nitya Lila, Avatar Krishna, how all these things differ, and how, and I was, telling, I actually wrote, 30 years ago, I wrote down all my memories of all the things, the main points that I discussed with Prabhupada, so I'm not going to go through them all now, because that's available if anybody, cause I couldn't even remember all that stuff now, but I had, long discussions, and there was even, I remember when we got to the 8th sloka, and I told Srila Prabhupada, I asked Srila Prabhupada, I said, Astakaliya Leela, is that the real Nitya Leela basis from the Govinda Leela Amrita? And he said, yes. And I said, can I put that in this sloka here, so the devotee, so everybody, so we could all know it from you? Prabhupada said, yes, you put it. So I put it wrote it in the sloka. And then we talked about Siddha Pranali, and I asked him, how do you receive it? And he said, when you're qualified, then Guru will give. And I said, and I said, what about realizing your Siddha Pranali, And he, because my relationship, I asked him, I said, is my relationship with you, even after you pass away, and even after I pass away, are we still going to have this relationship in the Siddha form? And Prabhupada said, yes, you're going to still have it. And I said, well, how am I going to know your? Prabhupada said, in the same way, the realization will come to you. When the time is right, Guru will give. And then he said, when I asked him, what about yours? He said, that's the same thing. You'll know at the same time.
So we were initiated in the park, but we didn't receive our names till the next day when we were in the temple. And I remember they called me up, and Prabhupada said to me, so, you are Marcy? And I thought, how does Prabhupada know my name? How does Prabhupada know me? He knows me. I was like really astounded. So he gave me my name, and he explained my name. He said, Madan is a name for Cupid, and Cupid is so attractive that he attracts others. And Madan Mohan is a name for Krishna, and he is so attractive that even he attracts Cupid. But Madan Mohan Mohini is so attractive that she attracts Krishna, who attracts Cupid. She is so attractive. Shrimati, it's a name for Shrimati Radharani, one who enchants Krishna. And he explained my whole name. That was very special. And I remember my smile was as big as my face, and right after that, I had no idea what my name was. I completely forgot. I had to go look on the list of list of names. So, oh yes, and after that, there was a big kirtan. Prabhupada led kirtan from the Vyasa. It was a very tiny temple room, and I was a new devotee, and I was very proud of myself because I could play kartals very nicely, 1, 2, 3, and make it really sizzle. And I had fairly good-sized kartals, and I was playing kartals. I was so proud of myself. And you know what happens when we become proud of ourselves? Krishna says, really? So I'm very short. I'm only 5 feet tall, and of course, I can't really see anything. I can't see Prabhupada. All I see is the backs of devotees. So all of a sudden, the devotees, when I'm having these proud thoughts, the devotees, there's like this opening, and I saw right to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada's playing kartals, faster and faster, and every time he would lift his thumb up, he did this little exercise, and the kirtan got faster and faster, and he kept doing that with his finger, his thumb, and I'm thinking, how is he doing that? Then I thought, okay, burst my bubble. I don't know how to play kartals. I don't know how to do anything. And then the ocean devotees went back, and then I had my realization. I felt Prabhupada really knew my mind. Yes, you think you're so proud, playing kartals. So that was the end of that particular pastime.
So now we're in Mayapur, 1975, the first really big festival. Mayapur, Hyderabad, Vrindavan. I'll skip right to the. We were put up in a construction site, basically, in Hyderabad, drinking out of barrels of water, and most of us were so sick by that time we didn't know what was going on. But Prabhupada was there and he was making it all okay. So I remember one incident. It was a pandal in Hyderabad. There must have been at least 15 to 20,000 people in this pandal. Prabhupada was cultivating some big guys who about trying to get land and make a temple in Hyderabad. And so in the middle of this, he's sitting on a dais, and there's maybe 50 or 60 of us, Western devotees, kind of like sitting around at his feet. And just after the lecture, they had people come up to the microphone and ask questions of Prabhupada. So one of them said, "Swamiji, can you show us a miracle?" And Prabhupada went like this. He just went like this. "This is my miracle." And we're all sitting there. Again, we were all in ecstasy, and the whole crowd just spontaneously roared, "This is my miracle." Oh, and it was like our hair was all standing on end, and it was too much ecstasy to see how Prabhupada's intelligence and his spiritual realization, to say that, here we all the Westerners, nobody could believe that Westerners could ever be like we were, and he just said, "This is my miracle." It was too much. It was too much ecstasy.
1975, when Prabhupada came to New York, he was also in Philadelphia for the Rath Yatra. And I remember there was one cart, and I remember he was sitting on the cart, and all the devotees were pulling and fanning and chanting. And I remember thinking, he looks like a king. He was just sitting there and everyone was around, and it was really nice. Again, his stature, the way he sat, his glance at everyone, his joy. Because 10 years prior, now this was 1975, 10 years prior, he was sitting under a tree with a pair of car towels. And in 10 years, look what has happened. See, this is also one of the things that really fires me up about Srila Prabhupada. The fact that an old man came from India, heart attacks, came to the Bowery in New York. They're crazy people, drug people, bad people. And what did he do? With a pair of car towels, he sat underneath a tree and chanted. And from that, a worldwide movement evolved. He has left his name within the annals of history. He has touched the lives of countless people, touched my life. My mother, I told you this earlier, my mother told me some years ago, she said, "Son, you are very fortunate because when you were young, you met your Savior." Now, I joined the movement when I was 14 years old, and I took first initiation at 16. She said, "You met your Savior." When she told me that, it hit me right here, because I knew it was true. Because she looks at my life now and she says, "You have achieved amazing things." And I know if I had not joined ISKCON or met Srila Prabhupada, my life would most probably be one of a dubious nature. Yeah. So I believe I was blessed. Most certainly, of course, I was blessed. 14 years old, join the temple, meet the pure devotee of the Lord, take initiation, do some personal service for him, get him to smile at you. I most certainly am blessed. That's right. I believe it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was always just to be in his association gave us so much confidence in the process. that if such a person of such intelligence and erudition and articulate, and how is, why isn't everyone impressed, with Prabhupada's speaking? It's just, the absolute truth seems so clear. Of course, for us, now we look back and realize, that this is Prabhupada's mercy in one sense. Somehow or other, that by whatever little opportunity from whatever agyata sukriti in this life or previous lives, somehow or other, we had the ability to hear. Which is how Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master marked him, that he likes to hear. So somehow or other, we like to hear, listening to those cassette tapes and those lecture series. We had developed an attraction, an attachment to hearing those words, because there was nothing that could match Prabhupada's speaking about the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Prabhupada, after he chanted on my mala, this is going back a bit, after he chanted on my mala, I asked him if he would give me Diksha Gayatri. And Prabhupada said, but you know already, don't you? I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, then that's fine. So I thought to myself, well, he doesn't really disapprove of, because everything, all these things I was telling him that I learned from Ban Maharaj, he was verifying. He wasn't saying, that's nonsense. He was saying, no, yeah, that's true, that's true, that's true. And I had a lot of, everything that I'd learned, I asked Prabhupada, is that the truth? Is this the truth? What about that? What about this? And I remember telling Srila Prabhupada one time, it really pains me to hear my godbrothers criticize your godbrothers. And Prabhupada said, who is saying like that? I said, many, Prabhupada, they're always saying that. And Prabhupada said, none of you can criticize my godbrothers, And so, he didn't give me Diksha Gayatri again. He said, you already know it, so just carry on. So anyway, then I asked him if he'd give me sannyas. So he gave me sannyas. On the day that he gave me sannyas, he had me give a lecture. And there was all the devotees there. There was a lot of Bengali devotees. So Prabhupada said, Prabhupada was talking, Prabhupada was giving the lecture. And I was sitting next to him down on the floor. And he brought up the 10 offenses against the holy name, Das Nam Aparad. So he turned to me and he said, Hrisikeshananda, you tell these Bengali boys in Bengali. So I went on for about almost an hour. I remember one Maharaj telling me, God, you gave a whole lecture. Because I went on and on, and I was starting to think, yeah, I'm getting this thing. So when I got to the 10th one, I just took my memory away. And I just said, oh. So I turned to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, I forgot the 10th one. So he instead of getting angry or being he just turned and started speaking, because he was also speaking in Bengali to these Bengali new initiates, So then after doing that book and spending a lot of time personally with Prabhupada and talking in Bengali and asking all these questions, and for about 2 weeks. Then we went to Calcutta. Prabhupada got really sick in Calcutta, and so I was spending a lot of time massaging his legs. He was in his room and he'd be laid out. And I remember I was thinking, wow, is he going to survive? This is really serious, because he was super sick, and so massaging his legs and thinking, boy, I'm really fortunate to get massage my guru's feet, and I was in there, and Shruti Kirti be on one leg and I'd be on the other leg. And so it was a pretty close relationship, right? He was really appreciated that I came back to him. And he also appreciated that I had had all this training, I remember one time, in the Gaudiya Mat, whenever they finish the kirtan and they do the Pramadavani, everybody remains standing. They like Jai Om Vishnupad, and they're like boom, the cartels and drums and so after that's finished, then they all bow down. So I'm standing there with all the devotees. The kirtan is finished, and everybody goes down, and I'm just standing there all alone. And Prabhupada's sitting on the Vyasasana, and I'm standing all alone. Everybody's bowing down, and somebody was giving the Jai, and nobody could bang any cartels because they were all bowing down. And I was standing all by myself, and I remember looking at Prabhupada like, what are they doing? And Prabhupada looked at me like, and then later he told me, he said when he was in New York, as soon as the kirtan would finish, they started doing that. And he didn't want to discourage them, and now it had become a thing that, you know, it was almost too late to fix it, you know? But I remember looking at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada kind of shrugged, you know, like, you know, because he knew that how it was done in the Gaudiya Math, every Gaudiya Math, the way it was done.
So it was Amsterdam, 72. This was the day after the installation of the deities, Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. And they announced that Prabhupada was going to come for breakfast that morning. Now, the scene in that temple, I think it was an old garage or something. You know where they have a row of garages? I mean, I really don't remember, but I just remember being like one big room and maybe a couple small rooms. There was a little office, a little kitchen, the temple room, and they did makeshift, you know, there was a sink there. They made makeshift bathrooms and sinks where you could wash your plate. But it was just a main room that you walked into. And I think upstairs the brahmacharis lived. And so where are they going to put Prabhupada? Oh yeah, and there was Kishori's room with her 2 children. So where are they going to put Prabhupada? Prabhupada was staying around, you know, the corner, not far from the temple. And they thought, okay, we'll have to put her in Kishori's room. Where else are we going to put her? So put Srila Prabhupada. So the brahmacharis went into her room, and they took every single thing from that room. And I kid you not, I was there watching. They just took everything and threw it into boxes. And they took the boxes and carted them off around the corner and put them in a van, one of the devotees, you know, temple vans. And so they're trying to clean up this room. And at the same time, everybody's trying to clean up, you know, in that main little area there and clean plates. And I mean, it was pandemonium personified. And of course, ecstasy, because we were so excited to see Prabhupada again. So anyway, so they're in Kishori's room and they're trying to clean it up, but she had children, and children like crayons and things like that, and they mark on the wall. So what are they going to do? I mean, this is my remembrance of it. So they took pictures of Krishna, and they put a picture here, they put a picture here, they put a picture here, they put it. It's not like you walk in the room and all the pictures are nice. They were like just covering up spots of crayon or whatever was on the wall, I thought. So then what was Prabhupada going to sit on? There's no asan. Nobody knows what to do. So they made another announcement, and they asked devotees if they could please donate their sleeping bags. And they piled them up, one on top of another, and put a cloth over that for Prabhupada's asan. Anyway, and they got some table. And then they needed plates and spoons for Prabhupada, the whole thing, you know. So they made another announcement, and I remember Sarabi, our god sister from Australia, we were in Germany together. So she donated that for Prabhupada. So when Prabhupada came, we had, you know, I mean, all this is going on. It's like, you know, you paint the floors, you paint the walls, and Prabhupada walks in, and why is the, you know, floor sticky? So, I mean, you'd think we had had it all together, and which we had nothing together. But right as Prabhupada walks in, you know, flower petals. Prabhupada goes and takes darshan, and the flower petals, and Prabhupada's walking on this flower petal little aisle into that room. And I thought, I have to see what Prabhupada looks like in that room, sitting on top of Muchi sleeping bags, borrowing somebody else's spoon and plate. And I looked in through the keyhole, and Prabhupada was sitting there as if he were sitting on a golden throne. It didn't matter to him what he was sitting on. He was Prabhupada. He was the king. He was so regal. He was so wonderful and so accepting of our mlecha, you know, qualities. I mean, it was so embarrassing. But then you got your sleeping bag back. And then you had Ma's sleeping bag.
So now we're in Vrindavan. And getting ready for the opening of Krishna Balaram Mandir. And Prabhupada, I'm sure that you heard a lot of things from a lot of devotees about this, but he was like a tiger, you know, and every detail he was overseeing. So we're walking out, you know, remember in the temple, Krishna Balaram Mandir, there was a fountain in the front. We were walking along there, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj had handed me his danda. By that time I was kind of like being thought about, you know, as being potential sannyasi. And so anyway, Tamal gave me his danda, and we were walking along. And then Prabhupada looked at him, looked at me, and I just handed the danda back to him, you know, because it was a message. It was a message, definitely, from Prabhupada to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And then we kept walking, and there was some refuge where the samadhi is now, that corner. There was some refuge because everybody was decorating and getting ready for the thing. And Prabhupada stopped. He pointed his cane. He said, "What is that?" And by that time, none of the leaders would come with him on morning walks because they knew what was going to happen. Prabhupada was going to grill them, you know. So there was, I mean, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there, Yadubar was there, Dhananjaya was there, Giriraj Maharaj was there, I was there. So we're walking along and he pointed his cane and somebody just said, "Prabhupada, it's just the refuse, we're cleaning it up now, you know, we're getting ready for the..." And Prabhupada said, "Just see. Every morning you chant, what is that verse? Mandira marjanado. Mandira marjanado. You sing it every morning and you don't even know that that's also the temple." A pin could have dropped. A pin could have dropped. So we started to walk and fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So I said, "Srila Prabhupada," he turned around and I said, "Oh my God, now I've got to say something." And I said, "Srila Prabhupada, it seems like you're the only one who can see everything all the time. What are we to do?" And he put his cane out and it came about this far from my chest. And he said, "Yes, therefore you must follow your Guru Maharaj." Now I connected to that incident where Tamal Krishna Maharaj took back his danda, you know, because anyway, that's my speculation. But still, it was very, very meaningful, you know. Prabhupada was, and I took that deep into my heart. So that was a very meaningful moment for me.
Now, I told you earlier that I had joined the temple when I was 14. Well, I was still I was in high school, and I used to go to the temple. I had moved into the temple, and I was going to high school from the temple. And I remember one of the devotees said, well, after I shaved up, you know, I was thinking, "Oh man, what do I do? What do I do?" And one of the devotees said, "Well, now that you shaved up, you know, you're still going to school. You're representing Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON, so you have to go to school wearing a dhoti and tilak." And I said, "What?" So I did. Now, firstly, I used to carry spare tilak in. Do you remember those old Kodak film canisters, the black with the gray cap? I used to carry some spare tilak in that to put tilak on. And I used to wear dhoti and kurta to school. Yeah? Now imagine this. Friday, here I am in school. Monday I come back, I got a shaved head, a sika, dhoti, and tilak. Man, I tell you, some of the teachers were like, "What's going on?" Some of my friends were like, "Well, we ain't hanging out with you anymore." Now, one day, I'm walking out of school. I'm heading toward the train station, heading back to the temple. Yeah, I got my dhoti on, I got my book bags, and these kids start throwing snowballs at me. It was like winter, right? And they were throwing snowballs. I was across the street, and I thought, how am I going to take this? It's on. So I walked across the street. I was ready for it, right? So I got over there, and I said, what are you guys throwing these snowballs at me for? And I remember one of them said, man, you dressed like a fool. And I said, right, okay. Then I had this thought in my mind. If I fight them, and they rip my dhoti off, and I'm wearing Brahmin underwear, that's going to be embarrassing and cold. And then I also thought, well, okay, all right. I am representing, because the devotees always saying, you're representing ISKCON and Srila Prabhupada. And I thought, okay, you know, the thought of Prabhupada in my mind, and fighting, that just didn't go. So I thought, okay, I won't fight them in my dhoti. So I turned to walk away. I didn't turn back to look at them. And they were throwing snowballs at me. And the snowballs were going here and going there and over my head, and none of them hit me. Now, I don't know if they were just throwing them off to the side, or if I was like, you know, in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, and they were throwing the snowballs, and Lord Srigade was making them go. I don't know. But none of them hit me. Yeah, imagine that, fighting in the, I was thinking, man, if they pull my dhoti off and they start swinging it around and I'm standing there butt naked. Oh, no. Ooh, yeah. You're laughing.
By that time, we had moved into the big building on 55th Street from Henry Street. So Prabhupada came and spent 11 days with us for that whole Rath Yatra period. And that was amazing. Morning and evening classes, so much association, so much opportunity to clean and stand guard. And there was, you know, we felt really, and that, for me, I felt useful in that capacity. I didn't feel that I had any other business to, you know, interject with my small, whatever, you know, I was. I mean, in my youth, of course, we used to debate, and I thought I was something intellectual, and we could argue logic and all these things. But when I heard Prabhupada, I felt there's no need for this anymore. You know, what's the point? And so, but we did sneak up on the roof, you know, because all the devotees were listening to Prabhupada, all the sannyasis. It was all the senior men at that time. Tamal Krishna and Sudama and, you know, Toshan Krishna and Rameshwar and Hari, you know, all the devotees. There's a picture of all the darshan up on the roof. Prabhupada sitting there just so regally, sitting on that Vyasasan. That was the Henry Street Vyasasan, which later went in the bus that took him to Gita Nagari and then stayed there and became the Vyasasan at Gita Nagari. And so he was there giving it, he was just leaning back in the Empire State Building behind him. It was just so much like he's the emperor of New York. There was no question. That building was so amazing. And we couldn't hear anything because we had snuck up on the opposite side there. But just to see Prabhupada conducting, you know, the conversation like that, so regally, it was just, yeah, we were very fortunate to have that association and to have 11 days of it like that, so much so. I got to sit behind Prabhupada when he was watching The Age of Kali in the theater, because as a guard, so I was able to get a prime position. So I was right behind Prabhupada. And I wasn't so much watching the play as I was watching him. You know, I'd already seen, you know, Sudama and the troupe. We'd already seen The Age of Kali. But Prabhupada was seeing it for the first time, like that. It was a remarkable presentation. And Sudama, Nandi Kishore, and, you know, Lohi Taksha, Lokamangala, and Mother Janava. Who else was there? Mother Rasagya. She was such an expert actress. Can't forget Rasagya.
I had guard duty at night. You had to carry a shotgun, of all things, you know, at the Mayapur temple. So I'm up in the roof, you know, and then walking down the third story or whatever story Prabhupada was sleeping on, by walking by Prabhupada's room, you know, and Prabhupada said, Hrisikeshananda, Ekanashon, told me to come in. So it was like 2 in the morning. So he told me in Bengali, go get Bordraj. I'm going to sing a bhajan. And so I woke up Bordraj, and he just immediately got up and, you know, came right in with and got the mridanga, and Prabhupada told me to put the harmonium on his bed. He was sitting on his bed. To put the harmonium, and I had kartals, and so the three of us did this. We weren't singing with him. He was just singing by himself, his Bengali kirtan, like Nitai Parakamala, one of those kind of songs. I can't even remember, but it was a Bengali song. So he sang this song really sweet, and we were just playing instruments. He wasn't doing a repeat thing, you know. He was singing by himself. Mm-hmm. We were just being his accompanying instruments. And I remember being so impressed with Bardraj. I have to say, that was a devotee that really impressed me, because he could play the mridanga fantastic, he could sing fantastic. Because I was never allowed to play the mridanga in the Gaudiya Math. I was never allowed to lead kirtan ever, you know. I mean, there was Krishnadas Babaji was leading kirtan. I mean, what am I going to do, you know? So I was never, the whole 6 years I was in the Gaudiya Math, I was never allowed to lead kirtan or play the mridanga. I could only play the kartals and, you know, follow with everybody else. But I learned all these songs. I learned all the Bengali songs. So after that, you know, Prabhupada dismissed us. And I went back to guarding. So that was an interesting experience, being in a little private kirtan with Prabhupada at 2 in the morning, just he and I and Bhardraj.
Okay, so when we were in the Schloss outside of Frankfurt in '74. So when Prabhupada came, we all squeezed into his room, and he was, you know, asking it was a Kadashi, I believe. He was asking devotees, what are you having? What's for prasadam? And that's when he said to us, you have to have peanuts and raisins on a Kadashi. And then there was another time, and it was not spoken to me directly, but it was spoken, I believe, amongst the devotees, and he gave an instruction, and he said, do not pick all the flowers, leave some for beauty. I have a very hard time following that. But anyway, that was an important instruction. That was very important. And I wanted to tell this one story of when my husband, Shivananda Prabhu, was massaging Prabhupada. It was at the Schloss. It was Nitai who was Prabhupada's servant, but he was ill. I believe he was quarantined. So they were running around trying to find somebody to give Prabhupada his evening massage. So my husband did. And so I waited up. It was maybe, I don't know, 9:30 at night. I waited up at the door of the women's ashram. So when my husband came, after massaging Prabhupada, I took my husband's hands and put them on my head and rubbed them in like that. And I smelled my husband's hands, and they were so fragrant. Now, Prabhupada did not get massage with any oil or any fragrance, nothing at night. So the fragrance from Prabhupada's body was otherworldly. It was so intoxicating. It just takes you out of this world. That was such an incredible experience. Smelling the fragrance of Prabhupada's body. Ah, it was so wonderful. It was so wonderful.
As I said before, I was not close to Prabhupada in terms of personal interaction a lot. I was assisting persons who were close to him, and therefore I was around a lot, but I wasn't direct. So one day in New York when he came, Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked me to put the sandalwood pulp on Prabhupada, which I'd never done before. So I was very careful. And you know how they make sometimes the sandalwood, it's a little bit too watery? It was like that. So I had to make sure that it wasn't going to, fall down Prabhupada. So I was very careful and put the sandalwood pulp and, and I kind of stood back to look, and Prabhupada looked up at me and he said, "Oh, thank you so much." Prabhu, the love that was coming from him for such a little thing as just putting the sandalwood pulp on his head was so powerful. It practically knocked me. There were steps I had to go back down to get to the floor, and I almost, fell. It was so powerful, Prabhupada, that he would love, that, such a little thing. That love we all felt, no matter what we were doing, no matter who we were. And that's what propelled this movement, and it caused it to explode around the world, without a doubt.
One day, he called me in his room, which he did every day, and he showed me a paper. It was a paper with my picture on it. And it said Richard S. Brown, alias this, alias that, and it was from Bon Marsh had printed this thing. It was kind of like an employer, who loses an employee to another competitor, because I had met all these rich people. I knew all these rich people, Sumati Mukherjee, every single rich guy in India. I knew them all, because I had worked on 2 schools with Bon Marsh. One of them collecting money, one of them collecting all the materials. I had to go around India and Jaipur and all these places. Built the school in Nandagram, which is still going, that school. So, what was I saying?
And he saw the newspaper article.
So it wasn't a newspaper article. It was a flyer that he had sent out to all the people that he had introduced me to, notifying them that I was no longer with him. But he did it in a really, like I remember saying he's disloyal to his country. I couldn't believe it, because he was like really sympathetic that I had run away from the army. He was like disloyal to his country, disloyal to his parents, disloyal to his guru. And he's run away, and he's a fugitive, and it was like a bust, And so I told Srila Prabhupada, what should I do? I've got to leave India. I can't. This is, So Prabhupada told me, he said, well, you should go to Amritsar. And there's one story that I didn't mention, that before Devananda and I had rejoined Srila Prabhupada, we had been in Amritsar. We had gone to Amritsar together. We went to Prabhas, and we went to Amritsar, and because I knew the mayor, Durgadas Bhatia, and he was dying of cancer, and so I went to see him before he died. And so we were in the guest house. We were staying at a dharamshala, and the police came, and I didn't have a passport. I was a fugitive, and I didn't have a passport for years. And Devananda had a passport, so they took us to the train station, to the police station at the train station, and they were asking me questions and making me. They said, "Is your name Richard Brown?" And it was really ridiculous. And I'm no. And do you know Hindi? No. And so they said, we have to send a fax, and so I'm just sitting there. I'm like, Devananda, we should just run out of here. And say, no, we can't. Man. They had one guy there. And so they finally came back and said, okay, we did, the fax machine is broken. It wasn't a fax machine, it was a telex machine. The telex machine is broken, so we have to wait till tomorrow. So you guys go back to your dharamshala and don't leave. And we'll come back and we'll finish this tomorrow. So we got back to the dharamshala, and Devananda and I, when it got dark, we snuck out and went to the train station, and even down the tracks a little bit, and got on the train and got out of there, So anyway, Prabhupada's telling me now to go back to Amritsar and collect money for Vrindavan. So I said, Srila Prabhupada, I was just there, and I escaped from the police, and I don't even have a passport. So Prabhupada said, well, you should go to Bombay and with Tamal Krishna, and meet Tamal Krishna, and he'll help you get a passport. And then you should go to Nepal. You should leave the country, go to Nepal. I didn't know it all the time, but Prabhupada was really upset about my being stolen by Bon Marsh. And so Tamal Krishna gave me 750 rupees, and I went down to this place. He told me to go to this travel agency, and so I ended up getting a passport with somebody else's picture. Somebody else's picture. It wasn't even my picture. And so, so okay, I had this passport, and it didn't have an entry visa. Didn't even have an entry stamp. It was just a passport with no entry stamp. So I couldn't even use it to leave the country. So what I did was, Devananda and I, we took the train to Birganj, to the border of Nepal, and I just walked down the tracks and walked across the border, and he said he'd meet me in the town, and I just walked through the jungle and came over and we met up, and then we went to Nepal. We get to Nepal and it's just a complete hippie scene, you know. So he and I both fell down in Nepal. We both fell down, and I ended up getting involved with a woman, getting involved with a girl, and meeting a sadhu, Kali Baba, Hrisikeshananda Kali Baba, who was he was the #1 sadhu in Nepal, and I became friends with him, and he gave me a Shaligram Shila that I still have to this day. So I wrote Prabhupada, I'm in Nepal, and I've fallen down, and I'm with this woman, and I'm worshiping the Shaligram Shila. And Prabhupada wrote me back a letter that's on file. He said, worship Shaligram Shila nicely, husband and wife. And don't forget, and strictly follow the 4 regulative principles and chant 16 rounds. Now, he didn't, scold me or tell me you can't do that, or and I'll come to Nepal, and thank Kali Baba for, Prabhupada was really merciful.
This was in July of 1976, and we went from Boston to New York. My husband, my son, and I, we went to New York to the first Rath Yatra, which was such an incredible experience. So my son was just not quite a year. It would have been a year that next month. So after Guru Puja, at that time, Prabhupada was giving cookies. So I went up to get I had my son in my left arm, because by that time I knew you're supposed to take prasadam with your right hand. My son like this, but he was facing Prabhupada, and I was holding him. And I went up to get my cookie from Prabhupada, and I got my cookie. And Prabhupada held the cookie out for Shamakunda. And Shamakunda was just staring at Prabhupada, and staring at Prabhupada, and staring at Prabhupada. And I didn't know what to do. I thought, should I take the cookie from Prabhupada's hand for him? Should I leave? What should I do? So I just kind of backed off a little bit, not knowing what to do. And when Prabhupada moved, he only moved one part of his body that was necessary to move at the time, which was his hand. And he took his hand and went, I don't know if it was his left hand. Anyway, he took his hand and went like this. Just like that, and motioned me to come back. So I took a few steps forward, and my son was still staring at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada took that cookie, and he forcibly gave him the mercy. And of course, children will just grab onto anything in their hand. He took the cookie, and then when he did that, everybody went, Jai Prabhupada! And my son had the cookie, and I floated away. I just was on 17th heaven, It was such an incredible experience. Prabhupada was so kind. He was so kind. And, it's like, sometimes we don't want the mercy. Not to say that my son did or didn't. He was just a child, but he was so absorbed in staring at Prabhupada. Sometimes I'll force that mercy on you. Take it. So that was very sweet. That was very sweet.
So then, Tamal Krishna Maharaj sent me out to Girinagari, because Prabhupada was going to go out there. His health wasn't so good. He wanted to spend some time at the farm. So he went there, and I was kind of like the ad hoc in charge, although Paramananda was in charge, definitely. But I was like ad hoc. So when the bus came up, he was driven there, and a Radha bus, and I was there, and I got to garland Srila Prabhupada. And there's a famous photo where Prabhupada and devotees were on either side of Prabhupada walking towards the camera, and everybody had grins on their faces. Do you know why they had grins on their faces? Because little old me was carrying all of the cushions that Prabhupada was sitting on in the bus, and everybody wanted to walk with Prabhupada. So I had to carry all these cushions, and I was like doing a jungling act. Everybody was laughing. I had set up the room, right? So somehow or other I got there without dropping everything, got the cushions set up, then Prabhupada walked in. And I was a little fried actually, because I thought somebody could have come and helped me, So Prabhupada came in, and he looked around and he said, oh, who has done this? Who has set up this room? And then Tamal Krishna said, Kesava Bharati did it. And he looked at me and says, very nice. Like that. I don't know. I took it that he was seeing what was going on, and I was just needing a little, you know, of that kind of encouragement. So then, the next morning, it was time for Guru Puja, and I was asked to chant Guru Puja to Prabhupada. There weren't that many devotees there. This was a rare moment for me. So I poured my heart out to Srila Prabhupada in that Guru Puja, in the Kirtan. And, you know, everybody paid their obeisances at the end, and I was standing there because I had just finished reading the thing. I was about ready to go down. He looked me right in the eye and he went, Jai. I fell because I had actually pleased him. And when you actually please Prabhupada, face to face, one-on-one, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. In my whole life, I've never experienced anything like it, even close.
For me, it was a combination of tolerance and mercy. And of course, you know, it's no surprise that these are the first two qualities. And I saw it on multiple occasions just in interacting with the devotees, including ourselves. Just, you know, we weren't, I mean, we must have looked somewhat, you know, every time Prabhupada would come out of his sitting room, we would pay obeisances, you know, and if he came out 10 times, we did it 10 times, and, you know. I'm sure he thought that this is, you know, you're probably doing a little too much, but, you know, he just accepted it, you know, as you know, odd as it, you know, we never thought anything of it at the time, but, you know, and how gentle he could be, you know, just with, you know, devotees asking questions, and he never seemed annoyed. Of course, you know, I'm not in that inner circle where he's expressing, you know, after listening for so many years now, conversations and this and that, you can hear when Prabhupada needs to be firm, he's firm, there's no doubt. But from what we saw, he was always very, with very little conversation, he could make a devotee feel 10 feet tall, 10 foot tall. And he took pleasure, it seems, in doing that, so that, like I said, even the small devotees like us in those days, which we're young, we felt completely sheltered, accepted, acknowledged, you know, and in many, many different ways, just by his accepting whatever little service we could render, you know. So, and I have to consider how tolerant he was, you know, even after his departure, when we were building his samadhi for so many years. And I was always conscious that, you know, this probably, I'm sorry that it's taking so long, because I mean, I was here for 6 years, living here doing that, but at the same time, it was for me, such a blessing to have that service. Because I was feeling such separation after he left. And when I got that service, I felt like I was whole again. And now I'm back with Prabhupada every single day. You know, so that was a great, you know, and that for me was that mercy. Who was I? But somehow or other, because I had a little bit of experience in doing construction, and for whatever reason, the opportunity was open, and I couldn't understand myself why people weren't like lined up for this service. You know, and India presents some particular challenges, but I thought the benefits far outweigh, you know, whatever inconvenience there might be. Of course, and my good wife with my 1-year-old daughter, you know, they deserve a lot of credit, because to pick up and move from a very comfortable situation to what was as far from comfortable as you could possibly imagine. And then to do it for years, because it took years and years, all the marble, all hand carved. So, I felt that I got a reprieve, I got extra association. I got association that I may not have deserved. But yeah, those 6 years were amazing.
Think about, because I also was involved with education in our movement, I think about how Srila Prabhupada, how he taught us every single thing that we know, every single aspect of life. And he taught us, like I mentioned earlier, through words, through his instruction, but by his example, his perfect, pure example. Everything he did was so perfect. And, if you were aware enough, you could learn from everything. You could learn from that. And of course, his humility, when I was offering him garlands, Prabhupada, somebody gives me a garland, I think, I'm a Prabhupada. You think all these things go through your head, even though, I shouldn't be thinking like this, but Prabhupada was not, he just accepted on behalf of his spiritual master, the disciplic succession, Krishna, he just, with all humility, just so, especially that last time in Sweden when I garlanded him, all humility. It was, and his kindness, he always acknowledged everything that everybody did. And you could see that in his interactions with everyone. So the little bit, direct, indirect service of, garlanding, but I could feel that acknowledgement, and that humility.
Srila Prabhupada had many qualities. Of the 26 qualities, there's so many that really impress me. But if there was one quality that impresses me the most, and that is heroism. Why? Because of the story that I mentioned earlier about him fearlessly coming from India, going to New York, sitting under the tree, dealing with all sorts of craziness and mishaps and heart attack, and starting his worldwide ISKCON movement. He was a hero. Fearlessness as well. He was fearless in order to do that. He was fearless. Spiritual awareness, Srila Prabhupada's. One of the things I'm really impressed by is Srila Prabhupada's intellect. I must admit, my vocabulary, my pronunciation, my diction, has all come about due to reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Why? I'll tell you why. Do you consider me to be a man of intelligence? Nicely spoken, articulate? Well, I never finished high school. But I accredit my intellect and my usage of the English language to Srila Prabhupada's books. Absolutely, absolutely. I would read his books, and I would also have a dictionary, because some of the words I was unfamiliar with these words, and I'd read it and then I'd look it up in the dictionary and go, yes. So when in a circle or when around people who are older than myself, I'm able to speak to them nicely as a man of intelligence. Do you know I have gotten many jobs in the past? And people automatically assume that, yes, of course this man went to the university. Listen to the way he speaks. Srila Prabhupada's books. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And another thing, the Sanskrit, learning Sanskrit. I was told that Sanskrit is actually sung, not spoken like we're speaking English. So when we would have kirtans or bhajans, the different melodies, some of the melodies, just the Sanskrit language. In Sanskrit, it's called Devanagari, which means the language of the gods. See, stuff like that, hits me, like deeply. When I came to the temple, and I saw the paintings in the temple of the demigods, Krishna, Arjuna, the warriors, the chariots. See, I'm a warrior. That's obvious. The chariots, the armor, the bows and arrows and the stories. Oh, just captivated me. I love the Mahabharata. Oh, I love it. Oh, yes. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness. You see, this really hit my intelligence, even at a young age of 14 years old, reading about Krishna immediately. See, when I was 11 years old, I tried reading the Iliad, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and I was only 11. I like philosophy. I like ancient readings. Yeah, these things appeal to me, and when I joined the temple, and it's just the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness is just the idea or the fact that God's a person, a supreme person. This really appealed to my intelligence, because coming from a family that's Christian and Muslim, we learned about God. So when I came to the temple, they were believers in God. I didn't have a problem with that. But to find out that God was actually a person, that really hit me here and here. Why? And it was explained to me like this: God is a person, a supreme person. And just like in the Bible, it says that God created man in his own image. And I would always wonder about that. But then the devotees explained it to me like this. Just like we have hair, eyes, fingers, hands, toes, and so on and so forth, so does God. So does God. And the reason why we have it is because he has it. And I thought, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Actually, I'll tell you a story. Do you want to hear a story? This is a good story. In my school once, I had several gentlemen from the local mosque here. There was the imam and a few of the other big dudes. And they were looking at my library. And in my library, I had the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, I had the Quran, the Bible, I had a Torah, the Kabbalah, I had lots of books. I have over 1,000 books in my personal library. And they were looking at it, and they were going, Ali, Shabazz, this is haram, this is no good, you've got these books and this and that. And also I had photos of the Shringadev and Krishna, and they were like, oh, this is haram, this is bad, this idol worship. No, this is wrong. I said, no. I said, these books, these photos are God. These different beliefs. And then they said, no, but Allah, when you see Muslims do this, Allah is one, he has no partners, and I said, okay. I could see that I was ready for philosophical battle. So, adhering to my understanding of Vaishnava philosophy, mentally I was like, oh, roll my sleeves up, baby, it's on, it's a fight, we gonna get it on. So I said, okay. God is a person. And all these religions, all of them are correct. And they said, oh, no. I said, all right. You have to understand, the current that runs through all these different religions is, you be a good person. You go to your house of worship. You honor your parents, your family. You obey the laws of the land. You give some remuneration to your religious institution. These qualities run through all these religions. And they said, yes. I said, well, they are all good. Just like, for example, you say that Allah is one, right? I said, okay. My father is one person, I said to them. And the relationship I have with my dad is, say, different from my mother. Because she knows things about my father I will never know. She calls him sweetheart, honey, my husband. I call him father. His uncle says, oh, okay, well, he may be your father, but he's and your husband, but he's my brother. I know things about him. You, your wife, the wife, and the son, you don't know. His best friend will say, now, wait a minute. Your dad, he's my best friend. I know stuff the wife and the son don't know. My grandmother would say, well, hang on a second. I used to change his diapers. I know things about him none of y'all know. True? He said, yes. I said, well, my father's just one person. Yet he can be understood differently by different people and called different names. And you're telling me that God is one person, God is a person, and he can only be understood one way. So how is it possible that a mortal being can be understood diversely, and the supreme unlimited being can only be understood one way? Man, when I hit them with that, bam! They were like, ooh. That was the end of the discussion. Shortly thereafter, they left. They left. I said, all these religions, they're all correct. They just have different relationships with God. But they could not understand, even when they were philosophically defeated, smack. They couldn't accept. Yes, God is one. Yes, he's one. What is it that the Vedas say? Achitta beta beta tattva. He's simultaneously one, yet different. Yeah, where did I get all this high knowledge from? Srila Prabhupada. My Guru Maharaj. Yeah. Don't mess with me. That's right.